The following program is reposted with permission of the station. Stony, Stone, and I were guests on this show several times. Please subscribe to The Take here on their tube. The link is in the description section.
And welcome back to another week of The Take. I'm Bill Gannon.
I'm John Spinato.
And our guest tonight is Mr. Heilman came back on. He's going to, it's going to be a really great show. I always look forward to the shows that he comes on. They seem like I learn a lot from these. So we're going to sit back and let him talk. Now, we've had these shows before, and you know, they've done great. People have been asking about them. They've got a lot of hits on YouTube. So I think when you really want to hear a discussion about, I don't know what you want to call it now, global warming or climate change. Well, climate change, whatever you want to call it. So we'll let him, get started. He's done a few things around town, and spoke to a few leaders and things like that about this issue. So we'll let him go to work about this, and we'll sit back and enjoy.
Well, I thank you, and I hope at some point, if you have questions, you pop right in there.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I guess we'll begin by taking a look at the slides I put together for tonight. What I really want to do is try to look back at what we did in that previous show, a general overview of the major points, bring that into focus, and then a little background on the science that goes behind all of this, and then finish it off with where the future may be heading. So if we could start with those slides. Get them up there. No, that's not number one.
That's 3.
There we go. Yeah, this just called the global warming update, the way it is, and move right on.
And
Other direction.
you got one more in front of that, right?
Yeah, there's one in front of that. We'll get them. Okay, this is a very serious concern we brought up at the last show, and that is what we are doing in education with our children. I'm very concerned that we're indoctrinating rather than teaching our kids science. Science is explanatory, and it's gone way too far when it comes to being used for political purposes. And that's what we see here. We're teaching our children that we are bad, adults are bad, humans are bad, and we are going to destroy the earth, and it's up to them to intervene with humans and save Mother Earth. Well, I hate to say it, but Mother Earth is doing fine. Its problem is people, but in this particular circumstance, we don't need to be saved from carbon dioxide and global warming, and that's what we want to get into. So if we could go to the next one here and some of the data we have available. We'll be coming up soon, I hope. Here we go. This is more of the same. It went from our little children into the high school kids, to college kids, and to politicians at Washington, D.C. We've gone so far as to include the Pope, which brings religion and science together, which is what happened during the Salem witch hunts. When you do things like that, we're talking about faith rather than science, and that's unfortunate. We shouldn't be doing that. I mean, you want to present the science, do so, but don't just present propaganda. So we'll move on and look at some of the data now, some of the older statistics that we talked about at our last show. Yeah, this is what we're proposing. You see this in the news all the time. Last year there were lots of wildfires. Well, last spring there was a lot of rain in California. A lot of brush grew, and then when it dries up, you got a lot of tinder. So there were a lot of fires last year. There'll be probably a lot of fires later this year because of all the rain they've had, unless it continues to stay wet. So we push these things and we blame these fires on global warming. Because of global warming, we got more heat, more drought, more fires, and we're in trouble. So where is it really? Next slide, please. Okay, upper left. the average wildfire size. And you see from back in time, it has gone from low to higher. So yeah, our wildfires have gotten bigger, worse, more damaging, which is interesting, and it has something to do with development more than anything else. Also regulations. At the beginning on the left there is when we started putting regulations into the scene, which says you got to stop taking the dead wood out of the forest because the forest should have it naturally for the birds and everything else. Well, that's fine as long as people aren't living around it. But you create a condition where there's too much tinder and too many people, and consequently, when you do have fires, they get out of control and very big. But in that same view, if we could just get back to that, the bottom right here is the frequency of fires has diminished over the years. Yeah, they've gotten worse. That's because we're managing the forests now and developing them. But the number of wildfires is less. Next slide.
That's interesting.
The wildfires were blamed on droughts. And so here we have a graph showing, well, first of all, the propaganda on the left. You know, you can't deny it. You look at pictures like this, oh boy, we are destroying our world. But you look at the statistics on the right, the orange-yellow there is basically Canada, North America, all of North America. I can't really see the dates back there, but it goes quite a ways back. And far to the right, getting to the present, we're looking in the blue there for just United States. And it hasn't changed. It's actually gone down. We have fewer droughts now, but we talk about them a lot more. And if it's not a perma-drought like we had in Texas, it becomes the Texas floods. If it wasn't the perma-drought in California, it became the severe floods of a couple of years ago. So at the moment, we hype it as being caused by global warming, but in reality, it's just the way we perceive it. Next slide. Okay, Hurricane Sandy and Katrina, a lot of publicity on them. Katrina came in as a Cat 3, I believe. It was a pretty serious storm. And Sandy, did that create ridicule? Sandy was decategorized out of the hurricane status as it hit land. The people were criticized about doing that. They were just following what the storm was doing, the reality of it. But the damage was devastating. It was devastating. It cost billions of dollars of damage. But it also went into an area that had lots and lots of current development. Areas that in the past were just marshes and wetland areas, now suddenly were very expensive homes. Lots and lots of homes have been developed in there. So you got to keep that into account. Now look at the right. Hurricane statistics from 1851 to 2005. Clearly, the statistics are fewer hurricanes. Okay, hurricanes is a term of a cyclone in reference to the United States. Next slide. We talk about the rest of the world now, we talk cyclones. And this is global tropical cyclone frequency from 1971 to 2016. From left to right, from 1971 to the right, 2016. You look at it. What do you see? An increase or a decrease?
Decrease.
It's down.
Decrease,
It's
yeah.
going down. Next
No.
slide. Okay, here we're looking at the ACE index. Now, the ACE is something that's very, very, very important with tropical storms. You can have a lot of little storms and not do much damage. The number may not be important, but the ACE is the accumulated cyclonic energy, a very important statistic. And again, from left to right, from 1971 to the present, which for this slide was 2016, especially from around the 1990s to 2016, there is a very, very distinct decline, while at the same time we're hyping cyclones and tropical storms as being bigger and worse than ever the world has never seen, and it's going to bring us to an end. Next slide. So that we don't ignore the southern hemisphere in our discussions, I grabbed this dealing with Australia, and it's not as current as some of the ones we've looked at. This is from 1970 to 2011, and the clear thing we see here is an overall decline in the number of tropical cyclones for Australia, but in particular that yellow on the far right there, where there is no red at all. There were no severe storms in 2010 in Australia. Zero, nada. That has never occurred since 1970, and I don't know what it was beyond that. So, are we increasing, getting worse, as the media tells us, or do we go by statistics? Next. In terms of tornadoes, the upper left is essentially all tornadoes from F1 to F5. The little graph on the upper right corner shows the tiny F0 up to the F5, the power of tornadoes. And you can see that big spike in the far right in the upper left diagram. Okay, there were a lot of tornadoes that year, an awful lot. And of course, that was hyped as global warming, but the overall trend of that upper left diagram is down, not up. Now, if we talk about only severe F3 to F5 in the lower right corner, very, very clearly demonstrates that the higher energy tornadic activity has diminished over that entire time span, which is from, what was that, 54 or something to 2014. It's a very long span. Next slide. This is the same thing, the overall index for strong to violent tornadoes, F3 plus in the United States. This is a very current thing up into the 2018 category, which is lower. Now, just as we look at this, I could say this is cherry picked. Why didn't we go a couple of more weeks? That's all, just a few more weeks at the end. Well, this was published before the spike came here in the United States. Why did we just now, in the last couple of months, have a spike that would have brought a line up above that line heading down? The reason we have a spike now is because of that very, very extreme cold we have all been experiencing this spring across almost the entire North American continent, except for the southeast corner of the United States. So when you get that warm southeast corner of the United States against all the cold to the north and west, that creates tornado alley. And it was predicted it would happen, and indeed it did for this year. Next slide. This is really it. This is the thing that has created such a clamor in the world today. The global warming movement is based upon these models. These are computer models. And how many do we have here? Is there 44 in this one? I don't know the number in here. There's many models from many countries that have all worked together to show where we are going and why the Earth is coming to an end. And all of this is based on CO2 and the increased levels of CO2. And the blue lines is, I believe, the satellite era of recorded indexes or ground recorded indexes. And we can see, yes, the Earth has been warming. I don't think anyone can deny the Earth has been warming. The question is, was it CO2 or something else? Next slide. Well, they tell us that global warming will result in less snow, no more winter sports, bad news for the kids, no more sleds, no more skis, no more fun. And yet, when you look at the statistics, that's not at all true. It's been increasing over the years. But we get 1 year in one area of the country with no snow, and it applies to everywhere else. Next slide.
Gotta find the one. Yeah.
This is one of them I love. This is the push to get you to feel global warming. Where would you want to live? Just at a glance, which of these two worlds is most livable? The one on the right or the one in the middle there to the left?
I'd go to the left, but We already know the answer to this one.
Yeah, we
This is
know
my
the
favorite-
answer.
Yeah, that's my favorite diagram.
They're both the same. This is just how the media has manipulated
Colors.
the appearance of things
Yeah.
so that you think, oh, look at that map. We're going through this. We'll never survive this. You know, you get this into the heads, you indoctrinate every single day. You push it, you push it, you push it. And if you push it enough, you hope enough believe it so you can move forward.
Wow.
It's the same identical temperature scheme, only displayed differently for intent. Next slide. Another thing that really annoys me, we had this medieval warm period. We also had a real warming period during the 1930s, the Dust Bowl, famous Dust Bowl. Very warm time. And yet, you look at what raw data in the blue versus the data in the red. Now, why did they take out that warming in the 1930s? It's very simple. We want to show a continuous warm-up. Not that it was warm in the past, because we can't account for that, so you make it disappear. And you look at the right there, those two diagrams. The one up the top is what is the raw data that comes out every single month. And every month I look at these things, and then I look at what goes out to the public down below. Now, look at the United States in the upper left. Look at the one below it. Where did all the blue go? Well, we can't show that. Look at the same thing for Europe and Asia. Around Siberia, up and across the top. Where did all the blue go? And then you look at the areas that are pink that become red. Impression, propaganda.
Yeah.
The real data, the published data. Next. So what I want to do at this point, we've covered most of that in the past. I'd like to go a little bit into some of the history on the beginnings related to the science. Next slide. We can go way back here to November 15th, 1738. Well, that was when he was born, Sir Wilhelm Herschel, who also discovered two of the moons and the planet Neptune there, Uranus and two of its moons. But more importantly than that, Herschel did a really cool experiment. He had a dark room that he was in, not like in that picture there, stylized, but he's in a dark room with a beam of light from the sun coming into the room. In the beam of light, he put a prism, which cast a big, huge rainbow onto a screen he had set up. He then went over there and put a thermometer into the blue end of the spectrum and recorded the temperature. As he moved the thermometer from the blue into the green, yellow, orange, and red, he noticed that the temperature constantly rose. What really caught his attention is he moved the thermometer out of the red to where there was nothing at all, and the temperature continued to rise. Dumbfounded. Couldn't see anything there, but there was heat there that was invisible. He called it radiant heat, later ultra-red undulations, because we knew that light was a wave form from earlier researchers in life, like Fraunhofer. So here we have the evidence of the radiant heat. He discovered what we now call, it came around the 1780s, infrared radiation. You can't see it, but you feel it when you stand in front of a potbelly stove and the warmth just comes out of it. Can't see it, but you can feel it. Next slide. So we had the introduction now of infrared invisible radiation. We travel a few years forward in time to John Tyndall here. John Tyndall actually did a lot of interesting work that was sent over to Louis Pasteur over there, who we knew about pasteurized milk and germs and things like that. And what Tyndall did is he realized that if you sit in a dark room with light coming in through a window, you can see these little sparkling things floating in the air. And like it's the mist that you see in those lower pictures there, or the light beam going through the cloudy glass of water, those things that are floating in the air. He called them tyndals. They became known as tyndals. In any event, he created that box on the right, and he coated the inside with glycerin, and over several weeks he kept passing a light and magnifying glasses and looked in there until he could see no more tyndals. Then underneath, he brought up into there these little vials of beef broth soup. He wanted to see if the soup would spoil as quickly as it normally does if he exposed it to a room with no tyndals. And it stayed for weeks without spoilage. He came to the conclusion that germs were the cause of spoiling of food, and they traveled on tyndals. He sent the information to Louis Pasteur, who moved on with it as the cause of germs passing through the air. So, more important to our discussion here is Tyndall also did work with infrared spectrum. He was an amazing scientist, and he was the one that coined the fact that CO2 actually absorbs infrared radiation. Fascinating. CO2 means it's a molecule, not just an atom with electrons going. A molecule is more than one atom joined together where its electrons share orbits. And when we talk about CO2 absorbing infrared, we're talking about something that happens with the molecule that causes it to flux different. It vibrates differently. It changes the direction of its vibration in some way. It's kind of like showing us that there's heat here. It indicates the presence of heat. Now, what we are claiming is that it's going to hold back heat. Because it's showing heat, it must be holding onto it, and that's part of the foundation for the global warming. So here we have a guy that has recognized infrared radiation and that it interacts. I want to look deeper into the science on this. Next slide, if you would. Just back to carbon dioxide, I made this graph with Excel spreadsheets, and I simply made the atmosphere on the left 1,000,000 parts, because we know carbon dioxide now is at 400 parts per million. It exceeded the tripping point, the no return point. It crossed 400 parts per million. That's there. It's in the graph. It's on the right side. It's there statistically. It just is not enough to be visible, but it is there. So, next slide. Here's our atmosphere. The blue is the overall air, most of it's nitrogen. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% argon. Whoops, that's 100%. Argon's one of them. Someone's a little less there, because carbon dioxide is 400 parts per million in that 100% there. That's the carbon dioxide right there. That's all of it in the atmosphere. And the purple, everything else, the neon, the helium, the methane right there, CH4, that's all there in the little purple. Next slide. Look carefully. Look carefully. Look real carefully. See the CO2 there? It's there. Look for the little black dots. That's all the CO2 spread out, dispersed in the atmosphere. Now, if we pull them all together in the next slide, you can see them all. Here they are. We pulled them all together. That is what is being claimed as the cause of the Earth being warmed.
Wow.
And it's doing this with its little vibrating atoms, which we've shown because it's infrared. Next slide.
But wasn't it worse at one point in the medieval times or something like that?
Back in the days of the dinosaurs, yeah, it was probably 1,000 parts.
Yeah.
That doesn't count because we weren't here then. Now, human CO2 is a tiny percentage of the natural CO2 emissions. The oceans contain 37,400 billion tons, gigatons, of suspended carbon. Land biomass has 2,000 to 3,000 gigatons. The atmosphere contains 720 gigatons of CO2, and humans contribute only 6 gigatons additional load to this balance. So when you add it all up, you get 40,720 gigatons total of CO2 in the system. Humans will add 6, bringing it up to 40,726. Humans are adding 14 thousandths of a percent of what is in the biosphere, and we are the cause of this tripping point. Next slide.
Wow. That's so
It's absurd.
absurd.
But here it is. This is where the hoax comes in. Energy comes in, left diagram here, the total energy is coming in from the sun on the left. Some is the source, some is reflected. To the right, we show that after warming, the infrared goes back out. Some goes into clouds, some reflects. They got all these numbers. On some of the things there, the plus and minuses are as big as the item itself. Huge variabilities, and they tie this all together with supermodels, and they come to the conclusion that when they manipulate the data correctly, they can get it to show what the Earth is supposed to be doing, caused by the forcing there of the CO2, lower right-hand corner. That's the little triangle, the fulcrum, the balancing point. You got all this energy feedback going out with water and clouds, yeah. And on the right, you have this forcing. Okay. Bold, but nevertheless. Next slide. This is the part that gets a little technical, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's very, very, very important. It's the same diagram as on the left, only it's in a more scientific form. The red on the left diagram there shows a big bell-shaped curve, which is incoming solar radiation. Notice the peak goes up and then comes down. To the right of that is a continuation of the electromagnetic spectrum from the visible red to the infrared, and all of that going to the right is all infrared going into the extreme. It would actually be extending from the infrared into the microwave, radar, radio, UHF, VHF, everything else is way to the right over there. It's all electromagnetic radiation. Upper diagram. The one down below shows all the areas where incoming and outgoing radiation is actually being absorbed by the atmosphere, and the cool, clear areas are where energy is free to move up and down. So, what is really important here is look at the very middle, right below the two upper big things there, it says water vapor. That's huge. That's where water vapor intercepts, and water vapor is up to 5% in the atmosphere. Not 400 parts per million like CO2. And water can go through 3 phases. It goes from solid to liquid to gas, each time transferring huge, enormous, unimaginable amounts of energy. Okay, now very important, next one down is CO2. You see that CO2 has some areas right in the middle of the CO2 that's free to go up, but on the right, it's overlapped a lot by water. Next slide. There was an equation in that last slide which I've translated in the upper right corner. It says T is equal to K divided by lambda max. Lambda max is the peak of that bell curve. If you take a piece of iron and begin to heat it, eventually it glows red. Heat it more, it gets yellow. You heat it even more, it becomes white. And you would see that bell-shaped curve go left, left, and higher and higher and higher as you get the metal hot enough. And the Earth, and you and I, also have a lambda max. We radiate out. We have energy. Everything radiates out. So what I did is I took that graph and that diagram, and I translated the equation into something that is actually meaningful and useful for people. And what I want to point out to you is the numbers here in the very, almost at the bottom where it goes from 0.2 to 1 to 10 to 20. Can you see that? Just up from that said wavelength, UM.
Yeah.
All right. Those are the wavelengths in the column on the left to the right in micrometers. But what I am showing to you is you look at carbon dioxide and you look at carbon dioxide where it is sitting there, and you realize that it's below 8, which means that that carbon dioxide that you are dealing with is way, even in the Arctic, it doesn't get that cold. So that is a reaction of the infrared for carbon dioxide that you wouldn't even see in the Arctic, because the Arctic doesn't get cold enough. A little bit of it comes over to where the water is. Now, the one to the left, the very middle, carbon dioxide there, right in the middle. If you look at that, that's 4 point something. We're talking 451 Celsius. Now, you've heard of 451 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
There was a book written about burning. Well, this is over 800 degrees. That's what Tyndall saw. He saw carbon dioxide responding to a high heat source. So, is carbon dioxide an infrared gas? Yes, it is, at extreme cold and extreme high temperatures. It has very, very little influence where it should be in terms of affecting the Earth. It just isn't there. But these diagrams are used, but no one understands them. Next slide.
I like that.
This is very important. This is Al Gore in his movie, Inconvenient Truth. This is taken from that, where he rides up and down on a platform and he says, up at the top, Al Gore told us, if there is one thing that is certain, when CO2 is up, so is the temperature. Yeah, we see that. But if you look at it carefully and look at any given point on it, you will see that if you follow a black dot going up, CO2 comes up behind it. The black dot goes down, the other one continues up, and then it follows it. Everywhere you look there, if you follow it carefully, you will see that CO2 is following the temperature. These are ice core samples with probably hundreds of years lag time between cause and effect. The next slide is today, what we can see right now with seasonal changes between CO2 and the temperature of the Earth's surface. And what we notice very, very clearly, changes in the surface temperature lead CO2 concentration changes by 9 to 12 months. Hey, is the tail leading the dog, or is the dog leading the tail here? Where's the cart? Where's the horse? You know, what do we got going here? This clearly says that carbon dioxide follows temperature. Like if you had a can of soda out of the refrigerator, open it up and go, tsh. Take the same can, put it out on the asphalt, on the pavement, the macadam, out in the sunlight. Now pick it up and open it. It explodes in your face. The ability for water to hold carbon dioxide is a function of temperature. So when the oceans get hot, it no longer holds it. It lets it back out. It responds to it. It output, not input. Next. Yeah, there's all your models again. And as of 2018, it had been 18 years. In 2018, it had been 18 years, 9 months since any global warming has occurred statistically.
It's almost 20 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years now.
Decades of,
Now, look, if you look at that model, though,
Wow.
there is one line at the bottom of all the spaghettis. See all the spaghettis? There's one at the bottom that goes right through where everything has occurred. No one talks about that model. It's the Russian model. Next. Now, this is what was used as certainty, okay? All along this ride with global warming, when they started out, it had increased confidence. And then it became really likely. As it got further and further away from reality, they pushed it more, saying, now it becomes very likely. And towards the end of this illustration, it's extremely likely that the Earth is coming to an end now. We're past the tipping point. That's what the models say. Reality said something else. Next. In all of this discussion, no one has mentioned the sun. Isn't that amazing? The primary cause for the Earth to be warm isn't even mentioned. How could that be? How could you not be talking? Well, of course it's brought up in discussions. NASA has talked about that, but they have informed us the sun does not change by more than 1% in its total irradiance. Well, maybe it's not the total irradiance of the sun, but certain areas of the sun's spectrum that may have a profound effect on climatology. Next. Here we see pictures of the sun when it's very active on the left, low activity on the right. Lots of sunspots, no sunspots like it is today. Next slide. This is a view that I look at every single day, actually. This is ionized iron at 193 angstroms. This is nasty ultraviolet. I mean, to take iron and ionize it like that. Nevertheless, we see lots of activity back in 2012, and as of 2018, just a short time ago, and today still, there's no activity to speak of at all, and that's very significant. Next. We've looked at sunspot cycles ever since Galileo in 1609, the far left spiked there. And then it stopped in the middle of the 1600s. As the activity and interest grew, it suddenly died. Reason? Sunspots stopped. There's nothing there to look at, no interest. And this went on for a long time until they spiked back up almost 40, 50 years later. A few sunspot cycles later, the sunspots came back. The Earth began to warm up again, then it dropped, and we had something known as the Dalton minimum, pretty nasty. A lesser minimum in 1900, and then you look at the highest spike there, that's when I was a little boy. In the 50s, actually, was the time when the sun was at its peak of solar activity. That's when most people of my age were really getting nailed genetically with damaging ultraviolet light. It was peaked out then. Right after that peak, the advertisements in the media was, we are going to a mini ice age. We're going back into the ice age. The Earth is getting cold. That was in Newsweek and all the media. And then it got warm again through the next cycle. So we had 1920 was down, 21 was up, 22 was down a little bit, and then we're heading towards 23 and on into 24. The illustration at the right shows that cycle 23 and the predictions for 24. This is NASA saying they know everything about the sun now, and it's going to go back and be worse than it was in the past. Next slide. So there's that slide that you just looked at on the left and the prediction, and on the right you actually see reality. Instead of being up high, it's down very, very low. That was the cycle we just finished. We're off of it now, and we're sitting at the bottom waiting for the next one to come in. And it's predicted by most to be extremely low, with the one following no sunspots at all. Okay. So they couldn't have been more wrong, and if you look at the one on the right that's so low, I'll tell you, a lot of that information was spiked and pushed. There was lots of ridicule to NASA and SDO and the other groups saying, no one in history would have seen sunspots that you are seeing with your satellites. And their reaction to that was, it is the way we see it, and that's the way we call it. I don't care about history. So it was fudged up. It wasn't as high as you see there if you did it historically. Next. So there we are at that minimum on the far left, known as the Maunder minimum. That's when the Thames River froze over and they had ice fears in the winter in Europe on the Thames River. Wow. That was cold. Nasty, nasty cold. Horrible famine, horrible crop failures, and that was not a good time for humanity. Humanity's population really took a hit during that Maunder minimum. And then, of course, the sun came back. It got active again and then went down into that Dalton minimum for a short time in the 1800s. And then we started rising up through the 1900s. By 1930, we had the dust bowls coming in. And now the big question is, where are we going on the far lower right corner? If we go into a Maunder minimum, it's not a good thing. Humans, societies, civilization thrives every time the Earth warms. It is a good thing, not a bad thing. Next slide. So the big question is, do we go where it was on the left, or does the Maunder come again on the right? Next slide. I just find this interesting. And this applies to what's going on in many things going on in the world today. All truths pass through three stages. First, it's ridiculed. Second, there's violent opposition, which, boy, it's going on these days in the global warming arenas. And third, finally, truth, true truth, gets accepted and becomes self-evident. And it will. If the Earth continues to heat and we fry and cease to exist, it'll be self-evident, won't it? The same is true if we go, it's what indicates cold, it too will become self-evident. like this last spring. And I'm not saying that that is global cooling, but I think it's something you should look at. Okay, next. We're almost done here, but I want you to think about this. I claim that the Earth is not a greenhouse in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. There you got greenhouses. Why are the windows open? Why don't they just keep them shut? I mean, is it still a greenhouse if you open up the roof like that? The answer is no. Why? Because of convection. Now, air is free to heat at the surface, expand, become lighter than the Earth around it, rise, and leave, and replaced by cooler air. That's what is happening there. So the view on the right, it's simply not true. The Earth is in no way like a greenhouse. The idea that it's a greenhouse or behaves like a greenhouse, it just isn't. It's an idea, it's a suggestion, sadly accepted on faith only. It is not even a theory because it simply cannot be tested. Plain and simple. But it is an idea, infrared. I would like to suggest you think of this. You're on the moon, bright sunlight. The moon's surface is like 400 degrees. Put up a barrier, stop the sunlight. There's no sunlight coming in at all. You're on the moon, it's 400 degrees to rock. So you put this big glass dome over you, you fill it with air to 1 atmosphere pressure. You got a problem. You're going to be cooked very quickly because that air's going to heat to 400 degrees. So you need a big, huge amount of air, big dome, so you can get the air to start moving, so you can cool the surface. Now, where does the air get its heat? Obviously, the air that you put in your dome is going to be heated by the rocks that are heated by the sun. So, if you don't have a dome and don't have the air, how do the rocks get rid of the heat? Radiation. You put a dome over, is it still radiation? Yeah, it is. But the air is going to be heated and take heat from the rocks, and it's going to start moving up and dissipating its heat into space. That's what the Earth does. It's free to conduct at the surface and convect the heat out of the system. That's how it works. And water, with its 3 phases, is the key to it all. So, can we go on to the next one there? I would like to just indicate where things may be going down the road here, and it has something to do with space weather itself. There is weather in space, more than we've ever known in the past. Next. One of the biggest components of space weather is cosmic radiation, which comes in from the galaxy itself. It comes in from the universe, literally. And when the sun is at high activity, the sun puts out a huge magnetic field which protects the entire solar system, especially the inner solar system, from these gamma radiations from the universe. Now, this graph was put together, on the top it shows the solar cycles starting with the biggie, 19, the one that toasted me as a kid, and up to cycle 24 that we're just leaving now. Below is a graph that was taken, I believe, in Denmark, although I'm not sure if it says there. In any event, that graph was, does it say where?
I think it said
Delaware. It's showing the cosmic radiation coming in. And you can see that it is in opposite directions to the solar activity. When solar activity is high, cosmic radiation coming in is low. You do not want to be hit with gamma radiation. It does nasty things to your DNA, and down the road, it does horrible things for reproductive functions, including the tissues, your skin, everything. And so we find it low when solar radiation is high, and we find the gamma radiation is high when solar activity is low. And when you look at solar activity from cycle 19 through 24, one thing that's very noticeable is solar activity is dropping down. And as it drops down, the baseline for gamma radiation gets spiked up. Now, this is a real concern for people who spend a lot of time in the cockpit of an airplane. It's a serious concern for pregnant women flying at 40,000 feet in commercial jets. And this graph was created to catalog and monitor these effects over time for the length of a time a pilot is up in the air. Not so much passengers, because they don't do it every single day all the time. Pilots do. So this graph is maintaining a record of this to look against what's happening to them. This is a serious thing with grand solar minimums, which may be around the corner. That means we all get exposed now to more and more gamma radiation. It's not a good thing. And it does something else more important that has to do with climate change. Next slide. Up at the top, this is kind of a graphical representation of a gamma ray coming into the atmosphere, and when it hits an atom in our atmosphere, it explodes it into a whole series of sub-energy particles. Next slide. They come down and hit particles, split again, continue. One more. So what we have happening here is that particle comes in and creates an enormous barrage of particles that scatter throughout the lower atmosphere. These are condensation nuclei. They will condense water that is in the atmosphere and create haze, which will collect and make clouds. Clouds are liquid water. Haze prevents solar energy from coming in, and clouds reflect most of the energy back into space. So when the sun gets low in its magnetic output, the solar system gets toasted with gamma radiation, the Earth's atmosphere gets hit, and the Earth gets very, very, very cloudy. Next. From tiny, tiny, tiny cloud droplets there, those tiniest little micron-sized droplets on the left, that's your haze, your fog. They grow, they accumulate water, they just simply grow. They just simply gather H2O vapor and continue to grow through a process of accretion. And then the little droplets bump into each other and they coalesce into bigger droplets. When they get bigger from collisions due to thermal convections created by their very formation, every time a molecule of water lands onto one of these condensation nuclei and condenses, it releases heat. Not just a little bit of heat. 540 times more heat than it takes to raise it 1 degree in temperature.
Wow.
540. Now, right now in the Arctic, the temperature doesn't change. It just stays and stays and stays and stays. A month ago, it was going up and down like a yo-yo, but once it reaches the melting point, it can't change anymore, because all of the energy, instead of changing the temperature of the world around it, goes into the phase change of the ice. So it stabilizes it.
Wow.
It is this phase change. It is this atmospheric condition. It's liquid water, water droplets that make the clouds, and it's the ice of the Earth that regulate the global condition, which is driven by the sun.
Wow. Well, we kind of we went over a lot of material tonight, and we kind of got about 30 seconds left. But we want to thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
And definitely informing us, because there's a lot of information there, and people are probably going to want to watch this a couple times over. But again, we always reserve you at different times to come in and do it again.
I'd be glad to. Maybe other topics.
Yeah, but we're not. We'll be all right for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Nothing's happened. We're 2 cycles away from grand solar minimum, but we're on our way there, and you will start seeing the Earth chilling out.
Yeah.
It stopped warming. 18 years, 9 months, no warming. It'll start going down slowly. Big lag, big lag.
Well, you heard it here first. So we want to thank Mr. Heilman for coming on. We want to wish everybody a safe and happy 4th of July.
Yes.
And say a prayer for someone else that's probably going to need it tonight. God bless. Have a great weekend.
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Indeed.
All right, welcome to another Spinato Spin. This time we're catching you right on the eve, if you will, of the birthday, of the celebration of the anniversary of our country, right? 4th of July, Independence Day. You can't ask for a more powerful word than independence, right? Can't ask for a more powerful word than being right on the edge of independence, right on the edge of doing something great with our lives, right? This is what it's all about. This is why we're here. If you're in this country, the reason why you're here is for your independence and for everything that's been fought for, so you can stand right on the ground you're standing on as you watch me talk to you right now. Now, here's something I wanted to talk about too, is you got to understand that life, more than anything else, it's a journey. And the thing that understand real simple, it's a great quote from a book, Unstoppable Confidence. It goes just like this. I'll give it to you verbatim, 70 words. Maybe you'll remember it after I say it. He said, all the happiest, most fulfilled, most successful people realize that success is a process. It's the journey of who we become, not simply the end result that basically makes life worthwhile. You see, the achievement of any goal is sweet. And yet, as with any goal worth achieving, there likely will be setbacks along the way. But viewing those setbacks in the right light can make the difference in your ultimate success. Your ultimate success. See, it's how you look at your bumps and bruises. It's how you look at all the times that you fell down. It's how you're looking at what it really all means for you. You know, there's something that people don't understand. I'll weave it in again with that 4th of July theme. There's a price to pay for anything. There's a price we all have to pay. If you understand what that price is in advance, it allows you to get where you want to go. It allows you to look at those things in the right light as those setbacks come, and how you keep pushing forward. Isn't that what life's all about? Pushing forward. It's not about whether or not you got knocked down. It's whether or not you got back up. That's all we're always going to be measured by. It's how hard we fought after we got our knocked down, right? After we got a couple of bumps and bruises along the way. Think about this real simple. Think about any goal that you set for yourself. Any goal. Any goal. When you were a kid, maybe they told you to take out the garbage. Well, they wanted you to do it every week, right? They didn't want you to do it once in a while. They wanted to do it every week. And why did they ask you to do it every week? They asked you to do it every week so you can start developing a person of consistency, a person of character that does things on a regular basis to improve their situation. See, it's not exactly the end result that you took out the garbage. It's who you became along the way. It's not that you raked the leaves in the fall or raked all the leaves. It's whether or not you became a person of integrity and a person of your word to do what you have to do. There's one question I always heard, very powerful. Someone grabs your hand or they look at you in the eye and they say, "Are you a person of your handshake? Are you a person of your handshake?" Well, yeah, okay, I'm a person of my handshake. You agree. Well, that person says when you're ready to quit and you're ready to give up, you're going to give it one more try. One more try. You're going to see if you can gut it up one more time to see if you could do something. That's part of the journey. That's part of what we're talking about being something and putting something together and be the kind of person you want to be. Become that kind of person you really want to be. You see, we're all going to be challenged every step of the way. There's nothing that's not going to come without a price. I'll tell you one thing, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You're not going to get anything for free. No one's going to give you anything for free. If they say it's for free, it's not for you. You know why? Because if it's not for free, it doesn't mean anything. Freedom came with a fight. Your freedom, your independence, your ability to become the person you want to be, you got that with a fight. I don't care what it was. Maybe you made a baseball team when you were a kid. Maybe you made a girls' basketball team. But you made it with a fight. Nobody handed you the position. You got to be willing to fight, and you got to be willing to pay the price. The price is the key. The price is what you're willing to do to get what you want in life and out of life. And life only gives you what you'll accept. It's only going to give you what you're willing to take. It's only going to be giving you what you're willing to actually settle for. You see, here's a question I always thought was very powerful. It says, what is it going to take to make you quit? What do we have to do to make you give up? You see, you got to answer that, and you're going to answer it. But you want to answer it in a way in which it's very, very difficult to make you quit. Why? Because you're going to decide way in advance. You're going to decide way in advance the price you're going to pay to get what you want. That's the difference. You see, success, other than anything else, is a process. You see, there's 4 simple steps to any action. First, you're sorry, okay? You're really bad at something, but you're so bad you don't even realize how bad you are. Then you realize how bad you are at something. All of a sudden, now you realize, oh boy, I'm really not that good at it. Now all of a sudden you start working on it, and you work on it over and over, and then all of a sudden you realize you are good at it. You are good at something. See, that's 3 steps. You went from not even knowing how bad you are, then all of a sudden you went to realizing how bad you are. Now all of a sudden you realize how good you are. Then all of a sudden, this is the one step a lot of people lose along the way, and this is where they lose a lot of their self-confidence. You don't even realize how good you are. While you're doing it, you just comes natural. You just go ahead and you do it. You take it for granted. You don't even realize it. Well, if you're that good at it, all you got to do now is practice teaching it to somebody. Teaching something that you're good at, and that even makes you better at it. And not only that, you spread the wealth. You let other people realize how good they can be, and how great of an individual they are, and how independent they could be, and how much they can share the enjoyment of actually being alive. You see, that's what we want to understand. We're on this road to greatness, and what we got to do is realize there's going to be a lot of potholes and a lot of things that are going to knock us down. See, the road to mediocrity is an 8-lane smooth highway. But the road to success and doing something and achieving something that's worth it is a very bumpy, beat-up road that a lot of people never travel because they're not willing to pay the price. But you're different. You're going to do something special. I just feel it, and I know it, and go out there and prove me right and have a great night. And again, happy 4th of July, everybody.
Please subscribe to our backup channels, Whirlwind Revolt, Inglorious Patriots, and Net4Truth USA 2 Patriot channel. You can also find us at Net4Truth USA on BitChute. We fly so close to the target, we're on our 4th fighter jet. We will be relentless truth seekers until the enemies of freedom are defeated. You can support this channel by using the links in the description, but for a $100 donation, I will personally send you a autographed hardcover special edition copy of Land of Childhood's Fears. Also, visit my bookstore at lulu.com/Net4Truth USA. If you are viewing this video on BitChute, you can use the links in the description to support us, or simply click the green $ dot on our video to support this channel. Thank you. Links are in the description section.